Hello and welcome to another episode of Top Deck, the series where we take a look at some of the leading TCG deck lists. So continuing on with this series, we're looking at some of the UK national champion lists, specifically some of the more interesting ones that maybe I couldn't pick up on the day. So this one is actually from Omer. This is not a top 64 list, however it's a very interesting list, and I think it's definitely worth taking a look into, just to see how the deck itself has evolved. So this is of course Zefra Pendulum. So we're going to start off by looking at the list itself, and then we'll go through the usual extras. So we start off with a triple Zefra, triple Mythical Beast Master Cerberus, one Destrudo, one Gate Zero, double Jackal King, triple Chronograph, triple Zefranui, one Zefra Exciton, double Dark Bomb, one Zefra Thuban, one Zefra Wendy, double Zefraxi, one Time Gazer to go with the Chronos, triple Droll and Knockbed, triple Dragon Shrine, triple Zefra Providence, one Foolish, double Call by the Grave, triple Oracle of Zefra, one Zefra War, one Divine Strike, and one Nine Pillars of Yang Xing. For the extra deck, one Vortex, a Chao Feng, Beals, a Yahtzee, one Odd Eyes Meteor Burst, one Dragster, one a Charge Warrior, a Vortex, there's a Naruto, one Strike Bouncer, so pretty interesting because you don't see it in many Pendulum decks, but it's very easy to get out your sixes in this list. They're super searchable, so it's a pretty nice option to have. One Borreload, one Zefra Metaltron, double Electromite, and one Underclock, typically just for when people take away your Electromite. Then there's double Sphere Mode here, double Veiler, one Dark Hole, but no Raigeki, double Wavering Eyes, triple Typhoon, triple Evenly Matched, and double Red Reboot. So a lot of life point losses that you can take from this deck in the current format, considering that, Trickstars do exist as a deck. But let's get on to the rounds that you played. And then we'll get on to the questions. So we'll go through the rounds first, and then we'll move on to just some basic info on the siding. So round 1 against Plant Stun, he couldn't stun him, so he lost, and that means that Omer won 2-0. Round 2 against Trickstar, he actually went against Dale Hawks. He won game 1, and he lost the next 2. Then round 3 against Sky Striker Mech Knight. He had no idea what the Mech Knights did, so he lost game 1, realizing soon that he needed to stop the Blue Sky, essentially won him games 2 and 3, so he won that round 2-1. Round 4 against Goki, his opponent kept bricking, and he didn't let him play by setting up negates and Chao Feng, so 2-0 there. Round 5 against True Draco, he lost 1-2. He's apparently he's bad because he made an insane amount of misplays and lost when he bricked. Lost when his opponent bricked in game 1, but then in game 2 he beat him, and he lost game 3 because of more misplays. And then round 6, he went up against Mech Knight Invoked. He won this 2-1. He only lost game 1 because his opponent told him that he'd scaled himself out, and for some reason he believed his opponent, so he placed Time Gazer and Chronograph Sorcerer into his scales. His opponent told him that Chronograph was a magician, so he just sort of ended there, and his opponent OTK'd him, which he definitely should have been paying more attention to, but it happens sometimes, it happens. Round 7 against Trickstar Sky Striker. He tries making plays, but Droll says no, and he doesn't open Call by the Grave, so he loses 0-2. Then, day 2, he went up against 3 Trickstar players in the last 3 rounds. All of his opponents opened Droll, and he never opened Call by the Grave through those matches. So, unfortunately, he did lose all of these 0-2. Actually, the one time his opponent didn't open Droll was the time he bricked, so that's a little bit unfortunate there. In general comments on the deck, he says it's genuinely really good and fun, but the meta calls for calls for Droll to be main decked in order to shut off his which shuts off his searching and stops him from getting up his scales and his counter traps and Drolls, things like that. So the only changes that he'd really make is he'd cut Called for Shared Ride in the main, swap out Beals for maybe a third Electromite in the extra deck. As for the general siding strategies, So if your opponent plays things like Disruptive Back Row, like Anti-Spell, he'd put in Typhoons, Reboots, and Evenlies just to be able to deal with all of that. If his opponent sets up an Unbreakable board, then he puts in Sphere Mode, plays it evenly, and the Vader as well, in order to stop them getting to that point. And obviously, if there are 10 minutes until time is called, then he puts in the Wavering Eyes there. So then I asked him a few questions over Facebook. I've got quite a lot of questions, so I probably won't go through all of them. So the first one, why did he decide to play a Pendulum deck, even after it was hit and rejected by most players? And then, why on earth he decided to play Zefras, which is quite arguably one of the worst Pendulum archetypes that are available, given their long history of underperforming, although you might see a few people arguing that, they do have a great deal of potential, they just don't tend to perform particularly well. He decided to play Zefra for Nats mainly because he bought it off a mate before the ban list. Then Astro got hit, so he decided to put away his Chainburn deck. He's a good player, and he'll play something a bit more fun and potentially better, but he was wrong on this account apparently. It was probably rejected by most players because it's a go ham or go home kind of deck. In hindsight, he should have gone home, plus he can't have ham, so that was the first hint there. He spent roughly £150 completing the deck, including some cards like Mythical Beast Engine. He then paid a further £200 to £300 on to go and attend the event and play with said deck. Needless to say, it was the best deck that he had at his disposal, and the best decision he made by attending. Performance was subpar, but all the players he played against were great people to play against and were really sportsmanlike, which sounds a bit rare for UK Nats, but does happen. He said that the reason why this deck tends to underperform is because they're countered really well by things like generic hand traps, Astral, and obviously Sheehan Squire. As for the worst Pendulum archetype, he thinks they're pretty nifty. So you did see that he's playing a Destrudo in the main, which opens up some interesting plays. It's a cool way to get into your 7s. He said, honestly, it's a bit of an annoying card in his opinion, but he needs to play it in order to open up the plays that get out Vortex and make his level 7 Synchro Summons more consistent, because who doesn't love the challenge of starting off with half your life against a meta where you get burned to death just by playing? Then he's got the Triple Shrine in the main, which we've seen a few people argue, maybe you want to run a few of this. In the previous Pendulum list that we used to see on the Top Deck series, he said it isn't really an issue too much, since the way that you're enabling all of your plays are from Darkworm being summoned from the grave, or from getting your Destrudo into your 7s, but he might cut it down to 2, since obviously it's a hard once per turn. Then he is only running 2 Called by the Grave, so I guess some memes should ensue. He said, I played 2 Called by the Grave because I forgot entirely who I was going to call. Then as for potential checks or changes that he could have made to the deck, potential text that he could have had in it, I suggested maybe Odd Eye Synchron, or cutting it down to 40, fitting in an Upstart, something like that, make it a little bit more consistent. He said after many discussions with the infamous Bradley Hayward, he informed him that it's a waste of a normal summon, especially since most of the deck relies on him having Electromite out first, and also he ain't no Hoban. He's got a Beals in the extra deck, which is pretty interesting because it doesn't counter a lot of the meta, and it really sucks when your opponent sort of brings out a Widow Anchor to just take it away and then link it off when you've invested so much in this card. He said he never actually made Beals because it never came up, and the only reason why he played it was for Draco, but he's bad, so he forgot to make it. As for changes that he'd make, he'd kick out the Beals and maybe chuck in a Horus or a third Electromite, something like that. Then of course we saw the Dark Hole in the side deck, no Regeki, he said, because only good players use Regeki instead of Dark Hole, and he can't afford one. Then he's also got Typhoons in here. He said it's pretty good during Nationals because it's an out to anti-spell Imperial Order and Unending Nightmare, so it hits all of the floodgates and it's basically just there for that. And you can do some interesting stuff against Altergeist as well. Then Red Reboots lastly, we saw a lot of people dropping this just because of the time rulings, and you know that you're going to have opponents who will be playing a little bit slower if they feel like they're ahead, and paying that 4k life, it's really, really hefty. But again, he said he relishes the challenge of playing with a handicap, starting off with Zefra, and then starting the game on 4,000 life points feels so satisfying when you win, so definitely worth it there. As for the hardest and easiest matchups, hardest matchups were anything that opened roll, and easiest matchups were anything that bricked. And then, would he play the deck again? Yes, unless someone offered him any meta deck for it. So if you're interested in picking this deck up off Omer, feel free to get in touch and change out your meta deck for this Zefra shenanigans list. Changes that he'd make to the main, he'd probably cut the call buys and put in some shared rides. As for the shoutouts that he wanted to make, shoutouts to Connor Reed, Pablono, Bread, Duncan, JY, Tips on Simo's channel, IQ Game Center in Huddersfield, Ed, Taylor, Napa, Matt Duran. Also shout out to Matthew Chen for making top 8 at his first ever nut. So congratulations to you, Omer. A very interesting list, certainly. Bit unfortunate with your rounds there, but hopefully we'll see you bringing out the Zefras again, showing the world their true potential and getting off those combos, not being hand-trapped quite so often. That would be pretty awesome to see, and good luck to you in future events. Thanks for watching this episode of Top Deck. If you have any comments or suggestions that you would like to make, leave them in the comment section down below. Check out the description for details of how you can get involved in this series. You can enter by voice interview, or instead you could just send all of your information over Facebook Messenger. Anything like that will be absolutely fine. If you want to see anything in particular from the upcoming series, then be sure to get in touch, and I'll see you guys in the next video.